Welcome to Mac Advantage, Professional Perspectives on Accounting. My name is Scott Showalter. I'm the director of the Jenkins Mac program. We are very fortunate today to have Barry Melancon join us. Barry is the immediate past CEO of the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants, so we know him as the AICPA. It is very safe to say that Barry has seen it all when it comes to the accounting profession. And so at this time, I'll just jump into the first question with Barry. And Barry, you have served in a variety of roles during your career. Can you provide just a brief summary? We could take all day with this, but just give a brief summary of your career.
Glad to do it, Scott. And first off, it's great to be with you. And thank you for all of your leadership on the academic side. You've served on our board and had the honor of serving with you on our board. So it's been a great relationship, and you're a great leader in a very important part of our profession, the academic community, the next generation. You know, as far as my career, Scott, I went to a nondescript university in South Louisiana. I grew up in a very rural part of South Louisiana. I always like to say, if for those of you listening, if you heard about the BP oil spill about a dozen years ago, that was sort of in my backyard. That's exactly where I grew up. And I went to a small university, Nichols State University, undergraduate there, and got a master's from that university. I went to a small CPA firm, never more than 20 people. Actually, when I joined in my hometown, less than 50,000 people at that time. There was about 9 people in the firm. It got up to about 17 or 18. So I worked there. I had a goal to be a partner, and I made a partner. My goal was to be partner by 25, and I did that. And then about 3 years after that, the Louisiana Society asked me to consider taking on the CEO role for the Louisiana Society, which I did for 7 years. And then in 1995, I was named AICPA president and CEO, and served in that role basically for 30 years until the retirement that you just mentioned. And I've been able to represent the profession worldwide, every corner of the country, every corner of the globe, in Washington, through a lot of different challenges and some really unbelievably positive situations.
Great. Thank you. Very good job of summarizing a very, very long and distinguished career. So let's dive just a little deeper in that. You did mention the CEO role, the Association of International Certified Public Accountants. By the way, that's a mouthful when you put all that
Let's say AICPA.
Just AICPA. And I'm sure our audience would really much like to know what was in that role. Okay, I'm sure it evolved over time, but could you give it a little flavor about what does the CEO of the AICPA do anyway?
Well, I think you have to step back and let me just define what the organization is today, and it has evolved. It was about 330,000 members when I became CEO in 1995, and today it's more than 600,000 globally. We merged together CIMA, the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, and the AICPA about 8 or 9 years ago to create a different footprint, global footprint, and also to address management accounting as a critical component of the profession. But, you know, the AICPA is a complex organization. You know, in our financial report for December 31, 24 will be on a consolidated basis, about over $450 million of revenue. We have staff all over the world today. So as part of the CEO, you run that, but also I was the chief spokesperson for the profession. So during Enron and WorldCom, I did most of the testimony before Congress and the media and all of the other major elements in the profession. We have a staff of more than 1,000 around the world, so I'm responsible for managing that staff and all of the activities there. We do have various aspects of the organization that sets standards, prepares the CPA exam, et cetera. And those committees, which we call executive committees, have the right to speak for the profession or do things for the profession without my interference as CEO or even the board's interference as CEO. They are subject matter experts with a variety of expertise that comes together, and they, through due process, expose standards or expose approaches to the CPA exam. Now, and they have the right to adopt that. And when we say spokespeople, we mean they can adopt it as a rule of the profession, a standard. So in auditing, in certain accounting and review services, management consulting today, tax, etc. And so our organization is set up to serve that and provide thought leadership for those committees. Obviously, we run peer review programs, ethics enforcement programs, and significant advocacy work on behalf of the business community as well as the profession. And my role also included representation of the profession throughout the globe. So every corner of the globe, working with other professional bodies, regulators around the world, business groups around the world. So it was a very vibrant type of role. And then in the U.S., we have state CPA societies and state boards. So state boards are a state agency and they're a regulatory component. It's where one gets their license. But then there's a state CPA society that's really an affiliation, a federation with the AICPA as far as certain activities of the profession, and clearly working very closely with them because in the United States, states are very important, obviously, in our constitutional mandate. And so that's a big part of the relationship as well.
Great. A lot of moving pieces. And you warned me when I came on the board that the organization was lots broader than probably you realize, and it is. Sitting through the board all those years and hearing the variety of different things, it's really eye-opening, everything that the AICPA does. So I am sure there was a lot of challenges and accomplishments during that period of time. And again, you could just share some of those challenges that you faced and what are probably some of the accomplishments you feel, the proudest of based on your career.
Yeah, I'll start at a macro point from an accomplishments perspective, and I've said this a lot as people have reflected on my tenure in the role, but I think the thing that we did mostly was we changed the AICPA, and I say we because it's never just one person. It's, during my tenure as CEO, we had more than 20,000 volunteers, just phenomenal staff people in all kind of different areas in the past and certainly currently as well. The thing that I think we did most was to give permission to the profession to be great. The men and women in our profession are extraordinary, Scott. They're ethical. They give their time to organizations in their local environments. They're thought leaders. They drive business. They support business. They obviously provide a public interest notion. Many of them involved in advisory groups in the academic community. Some of them do adjunct teaching. Some of them are professors such as you and leaders of accounting programs. And obviously work in corporate as CFOs and other roles. So we have this incredibly diverse group of people around the world. And to a large degree, professional bodies like the AICPA historically have been bodies, and I wanted to change this, that were about, you can't do this. We're going to protect the profession by saying you can't do X or Y or Z. And in my view is that the men and women of our profession, the firms, the people in corporate, et cetera, have so much to offer to help society be better, to help business be better, to elevate standard of living and the success of business environments. And so we worked really hard to be an organization that saw the future, that created opportunity, that created rules and standards that allowed for CPAs, wherever they were working, to take advantage of those things to create a different world and to really, I would say, to deliver on the promise of what the CPA profession is all about. And so at a macro level, I think that giving that permission was the most important thing. And then from there, people, smart people, develop different approaches, some successful, some not. The challenge is obviously is when you create that type of change is people have different views on that. So all along the way, you always have pushback. I mean, we created CPA.com as a part of AICPA, and that was in the late 1990s. And my basic message back then was, it was obviously the beginning of the boom of the internet. And there was an organization called WebMD that was commercially owned, not by the profession. And the analogy I made is that would be terrible if we had a CPA.com organization that was someone else's and not the profession's. And so we created that. Well, people thought people were against that. Today, I don't think anybody would be against that. And then as standards evolved, as opportunities, as business lines in the profession. We help to create and support some of those business lines like cash services, et cetera. Every step of the way, people would have their view of that's not how the profession should evolve. And that's natural, that's okay, but it is part of the challenge process. And just because a lot of the listeners here will probably be people taking the CPA exam, the computerization of the CPA exam, which occurred in the early 2000s, we were way ahead of other professions, et cetera. A lot of people in the profession of that day had taken a paper and pencil exam, and they thought that should be how the model goes. And we thought much differently. We thought you couldn't be a profession that says we can do all those things and have a paper and pencil exam. And so every one of those things has a degree of challenge. And then, of course, you have externalities that come into play. So very early in my tenure as CEO, we had Enron and WorldCom, which was a major sort of challenge in the capital market system, failure of companies, big companies, and the audit, where sort of how the audit fit into that process, and legislation to change some of the regulatory models, particularly as it relates to public company auditing, was a big part of challenges in that space. And then America's role in the globe, the global footprint of the profession. We believe that the American profession needed to have a very substantive role in the profession globally, and we did a lot of activities on the global side. And clearly, some people in the U.S. would say, just focus on the U.S. But the reality is that what I like to say is our profession is the most local, the most national, and the most global of all professions. There are great professions, other great professions, but typically they do not have those three layers like our profession does. And so if you subscribe to that, then it's very important to have a voice in all three of those layers as the world and regulation and business continues to evolve.
A lot going on there, a lot of change in that period of time. So that kind of leads me into my next question. And also, it's probably appropriate me for to at least mention briefly, congratulations on your induction into the Accounting Hall of Fame, which will take place later this year, which is just a reflection of everything you've absolutely done for the profession. So it gives me the latitude to say, okay, where we go now? You spend so much time in the profession. I know you have a view about where we are and where we're headed. So I'd like to be able to tap that from you as well.
Well, like in some of the things I said, sort of the explosion of the internet was a major, and sort of technology. I could give you each of the elements of technology. I won't, but I mean, clearly the microcomputer, the internet, cloud, all of those things were seminal events as it relates to how the profession was going to evolve. Today, we're sitting in a world of artificial intelligence, and that's a key component. We're sitting in a world, although politically there's more tensions about global commerce, we're clearly in a world that we proved during COVID that is highly connected from a business perspective, and the profession sits in the middle of that. And we are in an environment in which the firms, the largest firms in the United States, not just the big four, but the top 200 or so, and there are 44,000 firms in the United States, are in a major part of change. How do they have the resources to invest in technology? How do they have the resources to invest in the training and evolution of their people in a different way, with the speed and evolution of AI in that process, continued regulatory changes, continued tax changes that come about from that standpoint. So we're sitting in a period right now of, and there, as I said, there have been periods in the past, but this is a big one. The big eight, that now is the big four, really came about in the 1970s and the 1980s through sort of the beginning of the technological world and the beginning of a global commerce world. Now they're the big four, but this next tier of firms is really looking at their future, looking at structures, challenging whether partnership structures are the best model, and some will continue to be successful as partnership structures, but others are taking private equity investment, some are creating ESOPs, et cetera. And so it's a period of, I would say, maybe trial and error. We don't like to say error, but trial and error. I think that's great. I think there's nothing that that is written anywhere that there's only one way the profession can be successful. And so a multitude of attempts, actually everybody else will learn from that and make the profession better. I think on the human capital and the services perspective, AI will be probably the biggest driver on that. The traditional model of CPA firms, really since the 1940s, has been a pyramid structure. Our profession's different than, let's say, legal and even medicine, which is more of a cylinder type of a structure. Ours has been a leverage structure where the bulk of people are in the entry level part, and people progress up, and you end up with leaders, owners of firms at the top. And that's a high leverage model in the profession. And it's been like, that's also what a management accounting or a finance function looks like in companies. That is changing because of technology to be what I call a fat middle organization. I like to use the geometric shape of a hot air balloon, take it and turn it upside down, sort of a rounded bottom, a large middle, and a narrow top, which is now on the top when you turn a hot air balloon upside down. And there's certain business model issues of how you change billing and relationships with clients in that process, how you move people up to the middle quicker. So Scott, when you and I entered the profession, multiple years of steps from an entry level experience and ultimately to get into the middle of that pyramid and then ultimately all the way to the top. That time frame is changing. We're going to be a profession that expects people to be able to move up quicker, and firms are going to have to invest in capabilities of doing that, because the value proposition for a client, the knowledge to do an audit, the knowledge to do tax, which is embedded with different artificial intelligence technologies today, is going to require that process to move quicker. And that's the responsibility of the entity, of the profession, more so than the individual, right? And yeah, the individual has to be sort of aligned with that and committed to that. But it has some very serious ramifications to it. And then the global nature with outsourcing and things of that nature, a lot of that driven by technology as well, will continue to change the sort of what I say the shape of the profession. How it goes to market, how it accomplishes certain things. And that is going to be very interesting to watch. And there's going to be things that people do that aren't successful that have to be tweaked in that process. That's just human nature. There's going to be outside forces of more competitors, predominantly driven by the capabilities of technology. As an example, we're already seeing AI technologies in tax, for example. Forget the preparation, but really at the strategy level of how to minimize tax or to deal with global taxation capabilities. AI is going to change the mix of human capital and technology in that space. Auditing, we have a major project at the AICPA called Dynamic Audit Solution. That's about how do we reinvent the audit. All of those things are going to be in a major element of flux, from structure, outside investment, shape of the firm, business models, and expectations from human capital.
Good. Well, Barry, you just confirmed I haven't been a liar, because I tell the students the next 5 years will be an exciting ride. So I think you just substantiated my comment. I like to share with the students. It's a very exciting time to be in the profession.
I agree.
Nice to be on this wave as it goes forward. So.
Wouldn't you and I like to be coming in now to some degree? I think the opportunities for the profession, and to just build on that, Scott, and I think the students to understand this, we talk about the term trusted professional. The men and women in our profession as a group are the most trusted group in the world. I mean that in any element of the world. If you think about the world today, we don't trust political leaders, and we don't trust even religious leaders, and there's just not a lot of trust in the world. And technology is an element that has sort of broken trust in a lot of different ways, media, etc. But we as a group are trusted. And if you think about what I just described in the profession and multiply that by every industry vertical, every type of business is going through significant change. And being a trusted advisor in that process, or in the case of auditing, the trusted auditor is to sort of say what in the public interest is the actual facts related to an entity. is going to be very important as society goes through a rapid, maybe a forever part of rapid change because of technology.
Well, let's just move on a little bit because I mentioned at the very beginning you have retired from the AICPA, but that doesn't mean you're not still making contributions. So what does the future hold for Barry as we look forward? You're just now a couple of months into that, but I've already read you're doing certain things. What do you see down the road?
Yeah, I'm doing five or six different things. I'm doing some strategic advisory work for some companies that actually interface with the profession, working with their boards or strategic advisory type of work. I'm also chairing a global network of firms. So we know, the listeners know, you have the big four network of firms, but there's a next tier of networks as well. And one of those is Baker Tilly. And Baker Tilly, typically these networks have been chaired by a partner in one of the firms somewhere in the world. And Baker Tilly spoke to me about chairing their global board as an independent director, which is a different role and very exciting. We talked earlier, my international footprint is very important. And so I'm starting that role. I'm chair-elect. I'll actually become chair in October. And that's an important part. There's a couple of firms that are not in conflict that I am doing some advisory work with them as well. I'm doing a couple of things internationally with some organizations that are Asia-based, that are that really are about the economy and things of that nature. And so there is some not-for-profit work, there's some corporate or firm work, and including a public company. And there's a startup that actually, I think, an AI startup that's actually tied into moving people up through technology capabilities into that middle that I described, building a platform of predictives with AI to help a young person. It's called For Impact Data, that I've signed on for as a strategic advisor because I'm so passionate about the need for people to be able to move up quickly into that middle. And so I'm doing some work with a company in that space as well.
Well, we all knew you had to stay busy, but when you're not advancing the accounting profession, which you're still doing, what's the personal side of Barry look like here that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so some personal travel. You know, I in my role, in the last decade of my role, I was traveling 200 days a year. So it's not a lack of travel, but there is some personal travel with my family that we're doing, which is good. You know, 2 or 3, pretty significant trips a year. I'm a golfer, although in the last 4 or 5 years since COVID, that sort of has deteriorated a bit. So I'm trying to get that back and set aside some golfing along the way. I'm also a boater, which a lot of people say golfing and boating can't go together because they're both very time consuming. So my boating, pre this year has always been sort of, okay, pick a date that you're going to go boating, 6 months ahead of time. And of course, you're very suspect on the weather. So I'm looking forward to, some flexibility in the summer months of being able to say, 2 days from now looks great, let's go boating. So those are some of the big elements from that standpoint.
And so as we wrap up our conversation today, is there any final comments you'd just like to leave with our viewers before we sign off today?
Yeah, I think the most important, in assuming as a student particularly that might be listening, like the world is going to be very different. And, your skill set of being agile in that rapidly changing world is critical. But I think the opportunities for the profession are boundless, frankly. I think the ability to take the critical thinking skills, the ability to connect the dots, is going to be very valuable in the future. There are going to be jobs that are not going to be as valuable. The ability to connect, I use the term connect the dots, and I know, Scott, you agree with this, but it's really important to have a skill set that's not tunnel vision. That's, A to B to C to D. Instead, it's, A to E, F, or G. And there can be some modifications into that sort of linear thinking to get to G in my example. And the key, I think, for young people is to understand how you can continue to get to, the strategic vision, a business operation, whatever the case may be, with alterations in that path, and having the skill set of continuing to make that happen. I think accounting, I think the background of accounting and the broader business acumen is really, really, really set up for that. And what accounting does is it gives you the capability to see those things in its moving state and still keep things connected where they need to be. And that's why I think accounting is the best possible major in the world that we're going to have. Now, I would spice it in with as much, sort of broad-based thinking, some liberal arts courses, et cetera, that I think are important to build oneself to be successful in that world. I don't think you can think of accounting as sort of the stereotypical notion of accounting in the future. You have to think of accounting as this sort of broad-based notion with this great education that allows you to be nimble and agile to be successful with that trusted role. And so that would be my closing thought, that if you think about your career in that space, the importance of your education tied to what you're going to get when you go to work will make you, I think, incredibly valuable. Obviously, there's a technology component, but make you very valuable to society and to employers at large as the world continues to evolve.
Barry, thank you very much. Your passion for the profession is still very evident in what you do. I want to thank you for everything you have done, but knowing you, you're not done yet. So I want to thank you for the things you will do as well. And again, that passion. And thank you for taking the time today to be able to share your comments with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. Great to be with you.